The most luminous act of incompetence occurred here on this pasture. On the 1st of July, 1916, the Newfoundland Regiment attacked from the trenches that you can still see and over the shell holes that you can still see, and it attacked against barbed wire and machine guns and artillery that, through miscalculation, was still very largely intact. Within 40 minutes, 658 soldiers and 26 officers were either killed, wounded, or missing. That was 91% of the entire attacking force. All of the officers who attacked were casualties. The signs here say German line, Newfoundland line. The result was pretty much as though Newfoundland had taken on the whole military power of the German Empire. This was the test, and initially at least there wasn't any effort to disguise the nature of the war. It was for king and country, Kaiser and Reich. Roughly speaking, for the ruler and the system. Only after the United States came in did our national genius for finding high moral purpose begin to assert itself. Then the war became one to make the world safe for democracy. Further, to remind the men for whom they were fighting, the traditional rulers or their offspring showed up in the trenches from time to time on a quiet day. The men had an even more intimate manifestation of the system in their own officers. It was accepted in World War I that men would be led or sent to their death by officers of superior rank who held that rank because of superior birth or social position. But the testing of the system by mass slaughter had another striking result. Although it was not much perceived at the time, the better educated the soldiers, the more literate, the more culturally advanced as these things are commonly calculated, the more willingly they accepted death. The well-educated soldiers of Canada, Australia, New Zealand had a particularly high reputation as fighting men. Likewise, the more mature the capitalist society, the better its men fought. The industrial proletariat of Germany and England was especially reliable. A hard fact for Lenin. And the most illiterate and backward of the armies, the one from the country where capitalism was least advanced, was the one that revolted. That, of course, was the army of the Tsar. None of this was yet evident to Lenin, although his hope for revolution was diminishing. He prepared for a longer stay in Switzerland, and in 1916, with Krupskaya, moved from Bern to the more cosmopolitan atmosphere of Zurich.
In Zurich, there was a considerable number of young foreigners imbued with revolutionary sentiments. There were a lot of workers there. The Social Democratic Party there was more inclined to the left, and there seemed to be less of the petty bourgeois spirit about the place.
On January 22nd, 1917, Lenin addressed a gathering of youthful revolutionaries here in the Volkshaus in Zurich. He assessed the prospect of the eventual triumph of the proletariat. He had no doubt. But by now, he had been more than 10 years, more than a decade in exile. It was 2.5 years since he had left Poland. Years of waiting, wasted years. He concluded his lecture, his wife said sadly, with these words: "We of the older generation may not live to see the decisive battles of this coming revolution." He was wrong.
One day after dinner, when Ilyich was getting ready to leave for the library, and I had just finished with the dishes, Bronsky ran in with the announcement, "Haven't you heard the news? There is a revolution in Russia," and told us what was written in the special editions of the newspapers. We went to the lake, where on the shore all the newspapers were hung up as soon as they came out. We read the telegrams over several times. There really was a revolution in Russia.
In the next days, Lenin was desperate. How could he and they get to Russia? An airplane? That was mentioned only as an idle dream. Out through France? The French would not regard him as a helpful influence in Petrograd. They would most likely arrest him forthwith. To go through Germany was to risk being regarded as a German agent when he arrived. Still, that was the only chance. The Germans, on the same evidence, arrived at the opposite conclusion. For them, it would be excellent to have Lenin in Russia, an inspired troublemaker. Eventually, a Swiss socialist, Fritz Platten, arranged the deal. Lenin and some 20 colleagues would go through Germany. It would be on an extraterritorial or non-German train, a rather difficult concept. Better speak simply of a sealed train, and so the famous reference. It has always been imagined that the Germans wanted to be protected from the Leninist infection. They weren't that frightened. It was Lenin who wanted to minimize his exposure to the Germans.
Of course, in giving us permission to travel, the German government was under the impression that the revolution was a terrible disaster for a country, and thought that by allowing emigre internationalists to pass through to their native country, they would help spread this disaster in Russia. The Bolsheviks were very little concerned with what the bourgeois German government thought.
Lenin was very much concerned with what the Russian people would think of this help from the bourgeois Germans, worried about his reception. So it was a somber passage. On April 3rd, 1917, by the Russian calendar, which was then 13 days behind time, they came to the Finland station. Lenin was still some distance from power. But the Tsarist regime had shown itself not only anachronistic, but supremely incompetent. Its generals, with some notable exceptions, made even Haig and Pétain seem cerebral. So it had sunk under its own incompetence.